Most finance professionals using Claude right now are still using it one prompt at a time. You ask for something, you get the output, and then you start again tomorrow. Nothing runs unless you trigger it. And that means recurring finance work still depends on someone noticing it needs to happen. Business decisions, though, move faster than the reporting built around them. So finance often learns about a pipeline change or maybe a supplier issue or hiring decisions only after it has already affected the numbers. I built 3 Claude agents that change that. One monitors the business every day and flags what actually matters to finance. One keeps the financial model updated when a real assumption changes. And then one turns monthly actuals into a complete business review with the drivers behind every variance. And together, they turn finance from something that you check on into something that checks in on you, so that your model, the reporting, and the leadership view stay closer to what is actually happening in the business. Now, if you want the agent files and the setup instructions from this video, they're in my free community, which is linked in the description below. But for now, let's get into it. Every agent here follows the same setup. Each one gets its own project folder holding whatever it needs to read, one instruction file that defines the entire job, and a state file that tracks what it has already processed. And that state file is what lets an agent run on its own, since it only reacts to whatever has changed since the last check, instead of just redoing everything every time. Now from there, it's the same 3 steps for each one. Set up the folder, point Claude at the instructions, and check the output once something new comes through. The first agent I am building is the Daily Finance Intelligence agent, and it runs as a scheduled task inside Claude with the Google Drive connector turned on. And its whole job is to catch business changes before they reach finance the slow way, through a meeting or a forwarded email days after the fact. Now, every day decisions happen outside finance that finance eventually has to react to, like maybe a pipeline update or a supplier renegotiation or even a new hire being approved. None of it reaches you until it already shows up in the numbers. Now, put that together across a week, they can shift revenue timing, margin, and cash flow in ways that nobody in finance has actually seen yet. And the bigger the company gets, the more of these updates are happening all at once. Each time this agent runs, it checks its state file to see what it already covered. And from there, it goes through 5 live sheets in Drive covering sales, pipeline, procurement, hiring, operations, and customer projects, putting only the rows that changed since the last check. It also scans a handful of supporting documents, contracts, supplier agreements, and board notes for anything that has been newly added. Now, rather than summarizing each source on its own, it connects the updates across departments, so a supplier delay and a customer delivery risk end up explained together instead of as 2 unrelated line items. Now, the report itself always follows the same 3-part shape: an executive summary at the top, the business events and their financial impact in the middle, and a short list of recommended actions ranked by urgency at the bottom. Now, to set this up, I make sure the Google Drive connector is switched on under connectors first, otherwise the agent has nothing to read from. Then I open Claude and I go to the scheduled tasks on the left side, click new task and choose setup manually. I name it Daily Finance Intelligence Agent and paste in the instructions telling Claude to read the state file first, then review the Drive sheets and documents for anything new before writing the report against a fixed format file. Below that, I select the project folder holding the business documents, the report template, and the state folder. I set the schedule to run every day at 9 a.m. and I choose Opus 4.8 as the model, and then I turn on Act Without Asking so it doesn't pause for confirmation halfway through. The instructions also tell it to log anything uncertain rather than stopping to ask. So a run then finishes on its own instead of waiting on me to answer a clarifying question at 9 in the morning. Then I click Run to check that the first pass comes through clean. Now, on the first run, with no history to compare against, everything in the folder counts as new. So it comes back with 9 business events. It flags $11.5 million in pipeline sitting at risk, and it catches a real data conflict where a product launch plan lists two different year one revenue figures, 12.5 million in one place and 162.5 million in another. The report closes with an overall risk rating, high in this case, and recommended actions ranked by urgency. Here, chasing an overdue vendor payment first, then reconciling that launch plan conflict before it reaches a forecast. Now, the next day, I add fresh rows to all 5 spreadsheets, and then I run it again. The agent checks its state file, sees the 5 documents have not changed, and skips every one of them. It only processes the new rows, about 140 of them, and surfaces 10 new events. Procurement adds 740.7 million in newly committed supplier spend, with lead time stretched up to 160 days. And the pipeline adds 35 new opportunities worth $46.4 million, including several deals flagged for being marked as both closed, won, and lost at the same time. HR adds 30 new hiring requests across AI and cloud roles, which finance has not budgeted for yet. Now, the overall risk level comes back high again, this time driven by procurement exposure rather than pipeline noise. From here, the agent just repeats this same check every morning, only ever reacting to what changed since the day before. Add another live sheet or a new supplier folder, and it folds straight into the same daily read without anyone touching the setup again. Now, catching an event is one thing, but deciding it's serious enough to actually change the model is a different job, which is where the second agent comes in. The second agent updates the financial model itself. It needs the Gmail connector turned on, and instead of a scheduled task inside Claude, this one runs from a terminal as a continuous loop. Now, a financial model only stays useful if its assumptions keep up with the business. And you contract, a supplier deal, or a hiring approval each change something behind the numbers, and normally someone has to notice and update the model by hand. But this agent does that translation on its own. It checks Gmail for anything new since its last run, and it checks a finance updates folder where departments drop planning documents such as hiring plans or supplier pricing updates or sales forecasts and capital expenditure proposals. Now, when it finds something that actually changes the outlook, it does not touch formulas. It updates only the relevant assumptions inside the existing model, and then it lets the model recalculate on its own. Now, that distinction really matters. If it rewrote formulas instead of assumptions, then every future recalculation would drift further from the original template. The model would stop being something that you could trust without rebuilding from scratch. It also keeps the analysis consistent. Now, the same email or planning document produces the same assumption change every time, instead of depending on whichever analyst happens to read it that week. Now, that keeps the model continuously aligned with the business instead of only getting refreshed during the next planning cycle or whenever somebody else decides to do so. Now, once it recalculates, then the agent validates the statements and it writes an executive summary. Now, every recalculation runs through that same validation pass before anything is finalized. So an assumption that changes never breaks a linked statement further down the model. The summary explains which assumptions moved, why they moved, and what that does to the outlook, so that nobody has to reverse engineer the change from the spreadsheet. Now, before any of this runs, Gmail has to already be connected under connectors inside Claude, since the agent depends on it for half of what it monitors. The project folder holds a finance updates folder, the financial model itself, an output folder, state folder, and the agent's instruction file. I open a terminal inside that folder and instruct it to follow the agent instruction file, executing the workflow on a 10-second interval between each cycle. Now, each cycle, it checks Gmail and the finance updates folder. Now, if nothing new has come in, it reports the model is already up to date and it goes back to waiting. On the first cycle, it finds no new emails, but 6 new planning documents waiting in the folder. It updates revenue growth, margin, payroll, and capital expenditure assumptions across the model. And a little later, 3 emails come in. Hiring gets approved from 25 to 40 people. A supplier renegotiation cuts component costs by 6.5%, and a new $18 million contract closes with a company called Orion Technologies. The agent updates the model to reflect reflect all three. The 2026 revenue base moves from 15.2 million to 19.76 million. The 2027 figure jumps from 16.72 million to 34.78 million as the contract reaches full scale. Gross margin assumptions move from 42% for 2026 up toward 46% by the later forecast years as the supplier saving compound. And by 2030, the model's EBITDA projection nearly doubles from $6.68 million to $14.81 million. Net income moves from $2.77 million to $9.2 million over the same stretch. Alongside the updated model, it writes a summary flagging the risks that come with these changes. Hiring 40 people in 4 months, growing customer concentration around one large contract, and the pressure faster revenue growth puts on working capital. On every cycle after that, it checks GML and the folder again and finds nothing new, and then it reports the model is actually already current. Now from here, every new email or every new planning document gets folded into the model the same way without anyone opening the workbook by hand. Add another inbox or a new updates folder and the same instructions pick it up so that the setup doesn't get heavier as the business grows. Once the model reflects what's actually happening in the business, the last piece is turning a closed month into a report leadership can actually read. The third agent builds the monthly business review. It runs the same way as the model update agent, a continuous loop from the terminal, watching a folder for new monthly actuals. Every month, someone pulls the actuals, compares them against budget and forecast, works out why the numbers moved, and then writes it up for leadership. The work is different every cycle, but the process behind it almost never is. So as soon as a new actuals file lands in the monitored folder, the agent compares it against the approved budget, the latest rolling forecast, the financial model, and last month's business review. Comparing against both matters. A budget only tells you what was planned back in January. The rolling forecast shows what leadership actually expected only a few weeks ago. It works through revenue, margin, operating expenses, and cash flow, and investigates every meaningful variance against what actually happened in the business itself. It also checks whether last month's recommended actions actually got done, and then separates what represents a real risk from what is simply a good outcome landing earlier than planned. That continuity matters. If it treated every month as a blank page, each review would read like an isolated report instead of a continuation of the same story leadership has been following. It then writes the full package, the business review itself, an executive commentary written for a board-ready update, an updated KPI summary, and an action items list. The project folder holds a monthly actuals folder, a planning folder with the budget, forecast, and model, an output folder, a state folder, and the agent instructions file that defines the whole process. I open a terminal in that folder and instruct it to follow the agent instruction file, executing the workflow on a 10-second interval between each cycle. Now, because it runs unattended in that loop, there is no approval prompt to click through between cycles. And when a new actuals file appears, the agent follows the same instructions to complete the full review. For July 2026, revenue comes in at 105 million against a budget of 108.1 million. The agent traces the shortfall to delayed shipments in 2 product lines rather than weaker demand. It confirms the forecast had already priced that in, so the miss against budget is not actually new information for leadership. Margin actually beats budget by 100 basis points on supplier savings. EBITDA lands at 24.1 million, about 13% below budget. Net income comes in at 15.8 million, which is roughly 13.5% below plan, and free cash flow drops to 1.2 million against a planned 7.8 million, driven by a 3.2 million increase in inventory. And it closes with 6 recommended actions, among them accelerating hiring, confirming August shipments, and working down the inventory that built up. The following month, when August actuals land, the agent picks up where July left off. So revenue climbs to 115.4 million, gross margin expands to 50.5%, and EBITDA comes in at $32.6 million, with every one of the 13 tracked KPIs coming back green. The management commentary explains the jump as a combination of recovered July shipments and genuine demand growth in the memory chips business. It also flags customer concentration and margin sustainability as the risks worth watching next. Now, the KPI summary that comes with it gives leadership a one-page read on which metrics are on track and which ones need attention without opening the full review. It also checks in on July's action items, confirms which ones got done, and adds 7 new ones for the month ahead. The new ones cover things like headcount planning, capacity for the strongest product line, and steps towards making the margin gains durable. From here, the agent picks up every new month of actuals the same way, comparing it against the same planning documents without any extra setup. Add another entity or another layer of reporting later, and then it just runs on the same instructions so that the review scales with the business instead of turning into just more manual work. And that is the full system. You've got 3 agents covering daily business monitoring, keeping a financial model synced with whatever changes in the business, and putting it together in a monthly review without anyone starting it manually. Now, none of these agents make a call on their own that you wouldn't want them to. They flag, they draft, they update assumptions inside a model that you already built. Now, the report or the recalculated workbook still needs a human to look at it before it goes to a CFO or a board. But that review takes minutes instead of the hours it used to take to assemble the numbers in the first place. Now, remember, if you want the agent instructions and all the setup files from this video, they're in the free community, and that's linked in the description below. And I'll see you next time.